Lecture 8, Translating Education to the Field. Weighing Time, Money, and Outcomes, Associate Degrees versus Bachelor's Degrees. One of the big differences between an associate degree and a bachelor's degree is cost. A bachelor's degree at a state university where the student is a resident of that state is around $10,000 per year for tuition and fees. With room, board, and books thrown in, it doubles that. So the range is from $40,000 to $80,000 all in, depending upon your living situation. Associate degrees cost on average about $3,500 per year for tuition and fees, and of course are shorter programs as well. So depending upon your living situation, this ranges from $7,000 to $35,000. A person who is not working at all during their college tenure and has their living situation factored into the cost of their college greatly increases the cost estimate. With that big of a difference, why would someone consider going to a four-year school? Certainly there are particular jobs and companies that make it a requirement to have a bachelor's degree in order to be considered for employment. Often these are bigger firms like Nike or Apple, and so if a person wants to get into that level of employment, they have to pay to play, so to speak. I don't mean to suggest that one doesn't get much more out of their four-year education and that it is only about money. Students most certainly do get more education in the course of a four-year degree. However, the cost of education in the United States is very high, so it becomes a bit of a high-stakes game. Students can come away with a lot of debt, but hopefully a better career in the long run. So you may ask yourself, what's the best educational path for me? The way to think about what is best for you is to work back to front. Imagine or find the job you want and then do some research to find out what level of education you need for it. Annual salary and benefits are weighed against the cost of education, and a pathway opens up for you. Taking this course is a way to begin that discussion and figure out if this is a direction you want to go in, and if so, how deep you need or want to go in education. This should be researched and well thought out. Let's look at some of the graphic design areas of employment that we touched on in earlier lectures and chart their typical educational pathways. Let's start with Web UX, their minimum educational requirements. For an entry-level web production, all that would be required typically would be a one-year certificate of completion. Being hired as a web designer would usually be around a two-year associate degree. Web UX designer for a larger company or organization might require a four-year degree with exceptions. Creative director Web UX design would be a four-year degree with exceptions. And on these exceptions, one thing to note is that people can get into an entry-level position and move up on their merits if the company allows it. Some companies set the bar for particular jobs or levels of jobs predicated upon having a requisite level of education, and some do not. This is something to find out when researching a company that you're thinking about applying to. In terms of graphic design firm jobs, minimum education requirements would be for graphic design production, one-year certificate or two-year associate degree. For junior graphic designer, usually it's a two-year associate or four-year bachelor's degree. Graphic designer, typically a four-year degree, but exceptions can be made. Senior designer, typically is a four-year degree. Art creative director, typically four-year degree and sometimes a master's degree. In-house graphic design jobs have similar minimal educational requirements. Graphic design production would be a one-year certificate or a two-year associate degree. Graphic designer would be a two-year associate degree. Senior designer, typically four-year bachelor's degree with some exceptions. Art creative director, typically four-year degree and sometimes a master's degree. In terms of freelancing and contract work, of course, working for yourself as a graphic designer does not require any degree. However, some freelancing graphic designers do compete for contract work that can give them some regular income through workflow from larger companies. In some cases, a resume or portfolio, or both, are required to bid for the contract. The fact that a designer has been formally trained could be a mark in their favor or possibly meet a requirement for consideration. Alternative education. In the next lecture, we will be looking at alternative educational options, which include training through private and nonprofit organizations, as well as self-learning. How those translate to the field is variable, but certainly there have been success stories within the wide field of the arts about self-taught artists or designers. Some may have had a wide range of influences and education that doesn't fit within the norm of a formal program at a college or university. Thanks for tuning in. I hope that this has given you some idea of how the academic options for getting into the field of graphic design pair with the various jobs discussed. Please go to Week 2 in Moodle and take quiz number 8 when you can. And next up, Lecture 9, Other Educational Options.